Hello, everybody, and welcome again to SIS Startup Impact Summit. I am super happy, honored, and thrilled to have with me today Marten Rauschenberg. So Marten used to build startups in Shanghai and works currently as CTO at Enpact in Berlin. Enpact is a non-profit NGO fostering entrepreneurship in emerging markets. Marten is also my very dear fellow ambassador for Startup Asia Berlin. This is a co-initiative by the Berlin Senate and Enpact to bridge the startup ecosystems in Berlin with those in Asia, including Hong Kong. So thank you, Marten, for being with us. I'm so happy you're going to tell us how we can connect our brain directly to the web. I'm so much looking forward to your talk.
Thank you very much, Karena. I'm very happy to be here and support the SIS and especially Hong Kong in terms of ecosystem. Let's dive right into the topic of brain-machine interfaces. So with that, we're standing right now pretty much at the same place that we were standing in the year 2000, talking about smartphones. Now, less than 20 years later, everybody got a phone in their pocket. This keynote will give a brief overview of the most important historical events and then dive into the future to draw predictions and based on science and that is conducted right now. So controlling brains with machines or controlling machines with brains is actually a problem that scientists have been looking at for quite some time now. Let's go through some of the experiments. Already in 1968, Dr. Delgado, a Spanish neuroscientist, built a device that is called the Stimulation. He implanted it in a cortex of a bull in Cordoba, and with the push of a button on his radio transmitter, he could make the raging bull stood still instantly. Now, a couple of years later, in the 80s, scientists followed more up to looking into reading and understanding signals from the brain. Within the 80s, they also figured out how to read signals from a group of brain cells together, then process them and make predictions what this brain action is supposed to mean. Like we could, for example, see neurons firing in a monkey and then tell what arm he wants to lift. Interesting to mention is also Dr. Phil Kennedy. He developed Electrons. With them, he was able in already 1996 to let the first patient with locked-in syndrome using an on-screen keyboard to type words with his mind only. Later, Kennedy went so far that he even implanted the device into his own head. For a year or two, recorded brain activity during his own speech. These days now, his company is trying to decode that data to develop something that he calls the silent speech, where a subject only thinks the word and the computer speaks it out. In 2004, Dr. Reiner Gruber from the University of Maastricht conducted an experiment with MRIs, where two participants play Pong against each other using only their mind in real time. That obviously has a little bit hindsight on the hardware that you have to carry around. 10 years later, Dr. Nicolelis, another pioneer in this field, used invasive brain implants in mice. His team set up two chambers with a distance of 7,000 miles connected through the internet. The boxes contain each one mouse with a brain-machine interface implant. Every box got two levers with LEDs above it. Now, both mice have been trained to push the lever underneath the LED. As a reward, they get a sip of water. The mouse that is here called the encoder will only see one light going on over a lever. and the decoder mouse will see two lights. So that means the encoder has an idea which button to push, but the decoder sees both lights and doesn't know which button he's supposed to push. By connecting the two brains together, Dr. Nicolelis proved that actually the encoder mouse The experiment was conducted with 70% correctness, so ways above chance. What we essentially see in this experiment is that it was possible to transfer a piece of information in form of a thought from one animal to another. And yeah, that was 2013. Today, we are already using these techniques very frequently in humans. These processes are called deep brain stimulation, DBS. And it's been widely used in a range of diseases that I've been listing on this chart here. The FDA approval for the first DBS actually already happened in 1997. So this technology already came a long way, but never happened to be in the consumer's world. The technology mostly used is so-called closed-loop therapies, where the sensor measures brain activity in a certain region and then evaluates whether this activity is normal. If it's not, it stimulates these areas. The patient got 2 electrons implanted in their brain, as you can see in the image, and 1 generator in their chest. Basically, the device is pretty much something like a pacemaker for the brain. The problem with these electrodes is that they're obviously very big, clunky, and not very brain-like. So we have only 2 of them, and they basically trigger like half of the brain there. Later, we came up with smaller devices with more electrodes. Research in this field starts now to move out of the labs of university into the labs of venture capital-driven startups. There are many, but probably best known so far is Neurolink, a startup in San Francisco that is founded by Elon Musk. The 2 last years, they have been working hard on tackling the problem in multidisciplinary ways. First, they looked at the size and material problem of electrodes. They managed to build a layer-by-layer processed electrode, a little bit like 3D printing, that is no wider than 10 microns. That is 1/10 of a human hair thickness. Also, the chip itself is very small and will be implanted right under the scalp. Now, where they have so fine hairs of electrodes, there's no way of placing it that precise into the brain by hand. As a result, Neurolink developed a robot that places the electrodes with a tiny needle that's only 24 microns wide. Here we can see in this footage from Neurolink, we can see that what the robot does in action. We can see those little hair-like electrodes and how he places this in the brain. Yeah, in this, we can also see that the neurosurgeon is actually placing little marks where he wants to have these electrodes to be injected. And with that, the robot can also react on the movement of the brain, which hopefully you can also see. Now they get all these electrodes and the chip in the brain and receive a tremendous amount of data every second. To understand all of that, the company needs to dive deep into strong machine learning algorithms. And with that, will be highly data-driven. All sensors are connected to an inductive coil behind the ear, which then connects to a magnetic wearable device no bigger than this. It's called the link. It clicks on there. The link contains also the batteries. So if you take it off, the whole system shuts down. It also contains a Bluetooth sender where you can connect your smartphone. You use your smartphone to update firmware or actually to control the device. As an alternative for Neurolink's implants, I like to introduce Paulina Anikeva and her lab at MIT. Their approach is to try to figure out a way to communicate with neurons wirelessly, to get rid of the problem of the side effects due to neural implants. The idea is that neurons not only fire by electrical and chemical impulses, but also by mechanical in the form of heat. Paulina's lab is working on a liquid material that is conductive and creates small heat points when triggered. This liquid is injected into the brain and induct small charges through magnetic fields, and that would trigger the neurons. This is still very experimental, but it gives hope for highly effective BMIs without actual implants. Obviously, there are hundreds of more startups, researchers, and experiments out there that are worth mentioning. If you'd like to dive more into these details or even the history of BMIs, check uploadme.org, an open source website that I created to form a journalistic approach to give access about information of BMIs. Now, let's talk about the future. Besides the medical approach, private companies like Neurolink are thinking about consumer markets as well. In the following, I would like to dive into some of these applications that we can see a rise in the market. Most of it will be still due during our lifetimes. The first application we will see is an app store for all kinds of data that can be done with deep brain readings and deep brain stimulations. Now, we get all these neurons firing. We see them spike, but we want to understand better what they mean and how we can use them. Yes, companies like Neurolink have their own software and machine learning processes to make hardware run, but the real deal is always in the data. These app stores will open doors to thousands of gifted developers to build use cases and business models that use the device and the data. With each of them, we will learn more about the brain, about transcoding ML processes, how we become rapidly better. We build toolkits, libraries, and emerge sooner or later in building apps for your brain. And that will probably at some point not be much more difficult than today building a website. The next big thing in the world has waited for basically, is using a computer without a keyboard or mouse, and even, sorry Siri, without your voice. Data input will go a lot faster as we can submit data from the brain directly rather than typing or tapping. One way of approaching this problem is called silent speech. I mentioned earlier that Phil Kennedy was working on this. Basically, what we do is saying the words inside our hands without forming the words with our mouth or tongue. But there are also other approaches that will be more direct and not using the detour over speech. Now, think about how artists will be able to create digital art intuitively. Or think about how quickly the gaming industry will jump on it if you have an intuitive ego shooter or even more crazier games. So think about a pilot steering the plane as if it were his or her own body. When this tech matures, this will be the first real killer app. Because people who don't have a BMI of any form will be much less efficient. Adoption of this first technology will be very quick. Soon, employers will not accept people without BMI for certain jobs. New generations will jump on it very fast, and older people will tag along, much as we have seen with the mobile phone. After BMIs get government approval and are safe for use, we can guess that the same or even faster adoption curve will be happening. The next big application will be augmented vision. Scientists have already successfully managed to fire single neurons that receive signals from your retina. When fired, the person saw a bright white dot that wasn't actually there, just happened in his brain. Some years down the line, we will be able to project colors and complete images into your brain directly. But basically, that means that we could see an artificial layer of information on top of the real image that our eyes see. One way to use this would be to look at a person, for example, and we would see layover information of the person's name, age, or the Twitter feed, or his Facebook profile. Or, for example, we could project a virtual movie screen on a wall nearby, and every time we are looking at that, we see the football game playing, and the sound, we hear the sound, but at the same time, everybody else just sees the white wall. We have already figured out how to turn the analog signals into our brain, they happen inside our brain, into digital data. With the help of clever apps, we can save video, audio, 360 files, and other things that we probably invent new data standards coming up into whole experiences, including feeling, smell, temperature, skin sensory input, and also high-level thoughts, maybe like fear, joy, love, or other thoughts. These experiences can then be stored digitally into drives or in the internet. Thinkable is also that we will store digital data locally, either in silicon chips inside your brain or in a small device that we connect wirelessly to have data available at any time. Think this further. We could use brain stimulation to project these data back into the brain. For this, we need the original analog data that we have seen when the neurons fired, and then stimulate them exactly the same way. Depending on how many neurons we actually reach, the playing experience will be better or worse. Ideally, we could record and play all neurons in our brain and nervous system. Imagine how your relationship to your mom would change if you, in the age of a teenager, would have felt the pain that she had when she giving birth to you. With the BMI, external sensors can give additional input directly into the brain. For example, we could get data from ultrasound, infrared, or radar, and augment together with our reality. With the radar, for example, we could feel a car that comes up from behind of us. Today, if we want to exchange data with somebody who is not nearby, we will make a phone call. In that case, we can hear, talk, or maybe see the other person. With the BMIs, it will not only be possible to communicate without a headset. If we allow, we can also sense with the other person's senses. We can taste the food that he or she is eating right now. We can feel the wind on her skin. We could maybe even feel higher level feelings of that person, like excitement, love, hate, or disappointment. This will be possible with the granular firewall settings that allow us to set read and write settings for different parts of our brains and different levels of thoughts. Since this enables us for a while at least, to become a passengers in another person's body, the floodgates for all sorts of entertainments are open. Influencers will now be able to allow their followers full reading access to their sensory output, while performing extreme sports, expensive wine tasting, bar fights, adrenaline games, and of course a lot of porn. These experiences will be far more real than today's VR experiences, because the sensory output of the influencer, the encoder, directly goes into the neurons of the viewer, which is the decoder. This will, of course, not only revolutionize YouTube. Unique experiences and knowledge is something that we value very high in our current society today. In times of BMI, that will still be the same, but the monetization model will be fundamentally different. A helicopter pilot, for example, with 30 years of experience, would upload his experience as a data set into an experience market and put a price tag on it. Millions of other people who are now interested in flying helicopters like him would be able to buy and download this experience. With his knowledge, with this, knowledge basically becomes a commodity, and over time, the more content is available, prices will go down. That means that universities of the future will be disrupted by knowledge markets and app stores. Just like the mouse in Nicolelis' experiment, we knew which lever to push to get the water, we will now learn motorical skills, thinking practices, and fact knowledge. And of course, if we have a market, we also have black markets. I leave that up to your imagination to think how that would go wrong. One thought that I haven't mentioned is actually the reason Elon Musk got involved in the field. He has talked about it a lot in the press, so I keep this rather short. The idea is that if the intelligence of a general AI will surpass the intelligence of a human, and the AI will keep growing exponentially, then we will be very soon in the position of tiny little ants that we have in front of us. If they crawl around in front of our house, we don't really mind. But if we want to build another house there, they gotta go. Elon's opinion is that if we got a high bandwidth interface to merge our brains with the AI, we may have a slight chance of survival and assimilation with this new reality. Latest here, we should actually ask what reality really means to us. If we assume that all thoughts, experiences, and memories of our realities are nothing else than electrochemical processes happening inside our brain, reality will now be altered, augmented, and created. Our feelings for reality may become more fluid. We may get used to the fact that there are many different realities that we can live in and that we have to deal with. Besides living the realities of other people, we could also, for example, live the reality of our favorite animal. We could as well log into robot buddies that live on the other side of the planet, on the moon or on the Mars, and control them while it feels like our own body. What is reality then? If we look into the past, we can see that our generation already identifies much more with that little kid in Africa that we don't know and didn't really relate to before. Our media behavior and connectiveness have brought us humans much closer together on this planet. With the aid of mainstream BMI, large parts of the population have seen other people's love, feel their pain, and merge with other people's brain. We are highly likely to grow closer together as a species. I would not quite say that we will become like the Borgs from Star Trek, but there will be probably much more we than me in the future. How much individuality stays in every person is yet to be found out. I hope I could open your eyes a little bit in this field that has so much impact in our future and humanity, but that I really don't see people discussing too much yet these days. So I hope this sparks your interest in this new technology and that we can have a joint discussion in society and not just inside of the boardrooms of a handful of startups. Connect on LinkedIn if you are interested in me, or follow on Twitter or the website if you're interested in BMIs. Thank you very much.
Wow, brilliant, Marten. Thank you so much. I mean, I heard you speak already, but every time I listen, I'm just so fascinated. I mean, what you mentioned, blurring the real world and the virtual world is something that really, is defining what's next. And we have a little bit of time, and I'd love to dig a bit deeper and we talk about that. I mean, on the one hand, you always make me dream, as you know, if I could download the know-how from a helicopter pilot or from an astronaut so I could fly to planet Mars. I absolutely want to fly to planet Mars. Or maybe you mentioned I maybe do not even have to fly over there. I could just, beam my brain into a robot sitting on planet Mars. It's fascinating. Now, there are three questions. So one obviously is the question as well is how much our unconscious part, things that are kind of like somewhere hidden in the brain will be able to make visible through this technology.
Unconscious stuff. Yeah, I think that is a big possibility here, because what we already do with VR, which kind of like seemingly the first step in the game, right, is that we use it for quite a range of therapeutic options these days. So that is probably where we're going to hook on, and then we're going to see with the help of machine learning algorithms, we will see like what actually happens in your brain, not only in your neocortex, which is the area where you actively think, but also in your stem brain, like the core areas, where most of the feelings happening, where most of the motorical and subconscious things happen. And by understanding how neurons fire there, we will then get a better understanding also about all range of mental diseases and or state of minds that can be read and then maybe also triggered, and maybe that even will open up opportunities for us to see ways of connections or ways of thinking that we have never seen before, that our brain is actually capable of.
That's fascinating. I think so. One thing is that, visibility. I think the other big question, obviously, afterwards is about control. And, there are already articles out there that talk about, well, you have your real world you, and you have yourself somewhere in the digital world, right? In the virtual world. And when you connect both, I'm living a life here on Earth. My virtual avatar lives, I don't know, maybe in Minecraft or so. And when we reconnect, I mean, who controls who? Will my virtual self have more control on me, download what they experience in the virtual world down to me and impact me, or vice versa? And can we control who has control?
Right. I think the bigger problem there is basically that we have, it's not that your digital self will control you, it's more about the reception of realities. Because if we can live in a computer game environment and it feels like absolutely as real as we are living now, by touch, by feeling, by smell, by all kinds of feelings, then we can fall in love with an imaginary digital character and then live with this character in some kind of like digital world and digital environment, and this will be our reality. And then it's the question, do you actually want to come back into real reality, or do you just want to stay there? And at some point, there will ultimately be the question, do you still need your real body if you prefer your digital self, basically? So, and with this, ultimately also have a different life cycle, I would say.
Absolutely.
These are quite outstanding.
Absolutely. I can just imagine if I can beam myself into a Star Wars movie, I'm not sure I want to go back into the real world. But Marten, thank you so much. And thank you for being here, and hope to connect soon again.
Thank you very much, Karena. Thank you for having me, and great effort that you do on the SIS and for the entire Hong Kong and Bay Area startup ecosystem. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next time we'll see each other in Berlin for, you know, the Asia Pacific week, and we'll bring Hong Kong to Berlin. Thank you, Marten. Take care. Bye.